Welcome, everyone, to the Friday, August 30th, Am I on the Ballot or Not? Episode of On Iowa Politics. This week on the podcast, Libertarian Congressional candidates get the old ballot boot, a Republican nominating convention goes all the way wrong, and Republican disharmony in the state's most Republican Congressional District. Hello, everyone. I'm Erin Murphy, the Des Moines Bureau Chief for the Gazette in Cedar Rapids. With me this week, our Gazette Deputy Bureau Chief, Tom Barton, fresh off a lengthy chat with Secretary Tom Vilsack. How's it going, Tom?
Hanging in there, Aaron. Hanging in there.
Very good. On a hot day, a hot week like this, that's all any of us can ask. Jared McNett of the Sioux City Journal is with us. Hello, Jared.
Aaron, let's get this moving. I've got 17 more fantasy drafts to do.
Very good. Priorities. I appreciate that. And lastly, Todd Dorman, Gazette columnist, is with us. Hello, Todd.
Hello, Aaron.
All right. First up this week, unless this is taken to the courts and they decide differently, 3 Libertarian Party candidates for Congress will not be on the ballot this November after the state objection panel this week upheld an objection to their candidacies. All right, so we covered this in a previous podcast, so I'll go through this as succinctly as possible. But for the quick backstory, no Libertarian candidates for Congress filed and ran in the primary election in June. The Libertarian Party of Iowa instead nominated candidates in 3 of the state's 4 congressional districts, as is allowed under state law. However, an objection to those 3 candidacies claimed the Libertarian Party of Iowa did not follow proper party did not follow proper party organizing procedures as required in state law. Those objections were considered this week by the state objection panel, which voted 2-1 to sustain those objections, in effect booting the 3 Libertarian candidates off the ballot. That 2-1 vote breakdown was Republican Secretary of State and Republican Attorney General Brenna Bird voting to sustain the objection and kick the Libertarian candidates off the ballot, and Democratic Auditor Rob Sand voted against the objections and to keep the candidates on the ballot. So it's a little more complex than this. Please see my story for the full context. But boiled down most simply, Peyton Bird said they were simply following/enforcing state law, while Sand raised questions about the legitimacy of the objections and said the state panel has always erred on the side of keeping candidates on the ballot. Todd, beyond the mechanics and logistics and reading of the law, there's a political question here as well. Libertarian candidates could siphon away votes from Republican candidates, and a couple of these congressional elections could be competitive to the point where that margin in those Libertarian votes could matter. I can't answer this question because I'm a reporter, but that's why you get paid those sweet, sweet columnist bucks, Todd. So I'll ask you instead, was this all political from the start?
Well, I mean, it's, this whole process is sort of steeped in politics, in that the laws that they're citing were, of course, passed by Democrats and Republicans, and it's no surprise that they've made it as difficult as possible for any other party to meet the organizational standards that they've set out. So you're basically doomed to fail from the beginning.
And to that, sorry, because I want to just write on that note, Todd, to that was one thing the Libertarian candidates said, both in or especially to reporters afterwards, for sure. They said the state keeps putting up more and more hurdles for us to jump through. We jump over those, and then they put up new ones. Sorry, keep going.
Well, and I think a third party should probably get some leeway on how they organize and get their nominees, because they're not the same entity as a major party, but state law doesn't care. And of course, Republicans and Democrats don't care. So that's where we are. In this, anytime you see Alan Ostergen walk into a courtroom with a briefcase, you know it's full of the Republican Party's water, because that's what he's carrying. And he's going to do whatever the party wants and argue for whatever the party wants, and that's what he's done, and now several occasions over the last several years. Whether this, I don't know. whether this really makes a difference in those congressional campaigns is unknown. I suppose in the third district it might be more possible because I think the Libertarians did better in that part of the state. I don't know that it's going to make a difference in the first district, but uh, yeah, I think in the end, people should be given choices, and I think the Republicans were afraid that if they were given choices, then they might not choose their candidates, and so that would make winning more difficult. And I don't think that's the way you ought to, you know, administer election law in the state to make sure that your party has as much of an advantage as possible. But that's the reality of how it happens.
Yeah, and to that, Todd, I'll also just add when you talk about the maybe a third party like Libertarians that haven't been doing this for literal decades should be afforded a little more grace. One of the points that they raised, ultimately, the objection was sustained over the fact that so Libertarians conducted their caucuses and the precinct caucuses and their county conventions on the same day. They did them in succession, but they did them in the same day, and the minutia of state law that broke them in this case was that the delegates that are elected at the precinct caucuses, their term doesn't start until the next day, and apparently the Libertarians did this late at night, and so some of those county conventions started like at 11:30 quarter or whatever 10 o'clock 11 o'clock at night, and the point being that this boiled down to in some cases literally a matter of a couple hundred minutes was the difference between them having followed the letter of the law here, and that was the kind of grace I think they were trying to suggest that the state should afford them, and did not happen.
Well, clearly, I mean, the future of democracy was on the line those nights when the Libertarians didn't wait a day. I mean, we can we can put restrictions on absentee ballots and shut down, you know, uh, return boxes and threaten to throw auditors in prison, but I guess the Libertarians were the ones who really, really pushed this system to its breaking point.
One thing I was wondering about, and I was wondering this when we were talking about it before too. So when exactly did the challenges come? Because the primaries were in June, the caucuses were in January, and then this is something that's crescendoing in late August. So like, were those challenges initiated in June, and it just took the 2 months or whatever?
Ooh, that's a good question that I don't know that I know the answer to without having to dig up in my notes. Tom, you reported on this. It came out like around the state fair, but that's I don't know when the objections were formally filed. Do you, Tom?
I don't. I mean, again, my recollection is the news of this broke around state fair time, so earlier this month, but I don't know again when those objections were actually filed. I guess I just assumed probably around that same time, but
Yeah.
Yeah, it could have been right around I think they might have gotten serious about it right after the Democratic National Convention when the polls started to tighten. I think that's probably when they thought we've got to save this election from the Libertarians.
Well, or my thought was right after the deadline for when a party can get a candidate nominated to the ballot, which I don't know that date off the top of my head either, but
Yeah.
I think it was August 24th.
Yep.
Okay.
That sounds right.
Okay.
The other thing is, so this doesn't affect the state house races, right?
Correct. And it doesn't affect the presidential Libertarian candidate.
Yeah. Okay. Just the congressional folks.
Yep. Well, I mean, the objections do because those were the only candidacies that were objected to. If maybe if I can travel down that road that maybe you're trying to clear a little bit here, Jared. Theoretically, the reasons for the objections would apply to any candidate, any libertarian candidate nominated in Iowa, but the objections were only filed for the congressional candidates.
Boy, that just so happened to be what I was curious about.
It's picking up what you're putting down there, I think, is the quote, the great was that a Ron Burgundy? No, it's never mind. Sorry, it's a Jimmy Fallon skit. Well, and the loose end here is like I said, it's possible that this will be challenged in court. It sounded more likely than not than libertarians would. So we'll be following that, obviously, and they'll have to do it soon because the Secretary of State certifies ballots on September 3rd, and they can start getting printed after that. So if that court challenge would need to happen fast if it's going to matter. So who knows, by the time you listen to this podcast, maybe they already have.
With the holiday weekend sandwiched between there.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to look on my handy dandy calendar. The 3rd it's Tuesday. So they would need to have that filing in before that. I would, and the judge would have to rule quickly. So we'll see. Maybe there's not even time for it. I don't know. I'm not that well steeped in the legal process, but we shall see. All right. We move on to another candidate nominating convention that did not go as planned. Again, we discussed this on a previous podcast as well. There was a disagreement between the Lynn County Republicans and the state party, the Republican Party of Iowa, over the results of a nominating convention for an Iowa House election. So this is a state House candidate. It boiled down to how delegates' votes were counted and whether a signed nomination could be undone. And that's the very, very minimal explanation there. Tom, you can fill in a little bit more, but this week we got the resolution, and I got to tell you, it's not what I expected. Tom, tell us what happened.
So Republicans picked a candidate for an Iowa House seat, but one won't appear on the ballot.
It's amazing.
So a Republican will not appear on the ballot this fall to challenge a Democratic incumbent for a local legislative seat after the chair of a Lynn County GOP special nominating convention refused to certify the results. So Lynn County Republicans held a special nominating convention August 13th to nominate a candidate to run for Iowa House District 73, since no one ran for the seat in the June GOP primary, and the party was left without a candidate. So that district covers a portion of Cedar Rapids and much of northern and eastern Marion. It's currently represented by Democrat Elizabeth Wilson, who's seeking re-election to a second term. She won the open seat in 2022, edging out a Republican former Cedar Rapids City Council member by 300 votes after a recount. So Geraldine Jones, who is chair of the Lynn County chapter of Moms for Liberty, and Jim Conklin, who's a former chair of the Lynn County Republican Party Central Committee, both sought the local party's nomination to run for that Iowa House seat against Elizabeth Wilson. Justin Wasson, who serves on the Iowa GOP's State Central Committee and serves as the chair of that special nominating convention, said that Conklin received 9 votes to Jones' 7, and Conklin was declared the winner August 13th by a Republican Party of Iowa staffer. And then after adjourning that special nominating convention, Wasson and Conklin said they formalized the paperwork to submit to the Iowa Secretary of State's office for Conklin to be listed on the November 5th ballot. That included a signed and notarized affidavit of candidacy and a convention certificate. However, the next day, the Republican Party of Iowa audited the votes that were cast and discovered a tabulation error. So a spokesperson for the party said that the error flipped the already close election to Geraldine Jones' favor. And so the Republican Party of Iowa said that Jones was the correct winner of the convention and deemed that so because they determined that she was the nominee by weighted vote, based on the voting strength of each precinct represented at the convention. So the Republican Party of Iowa's constitution says that votes cast by party precinct committee members at a convention to fill a ballot vacancy be made proportionate to the vote cast for the party's candidate for the office in question in the respective precincts at the last general election for that office. So essentially what that meant is that each precinct committee member's votes should have been weighted corresponding to the number of Republicans that voted in their precinct in the last general election, which was in 2022. The chair of the nominating convention, though, and Jim Conklin contend that the state party came to this conclusion too late and that no one contested the results the night of the convention. And it should be pointed out that Justin Wasson, the chair of the nominating convention, says that, both Geraldine Jones and Jim Conklin, can make a case for winning the nomination, but he felt that the strongest case in his mind was that members of the convention approved rules at the convention. Those rules were followed, which said that the election could be contested by raising a point of order. He says that, there was an opportunity to contest the results within the convention, and no one did. And he argues that the voting body itself, so the party precinct members that made up the convention, is the ultimate judge of election disputes, absent a bylaw or special rule that grants the state party that authority. And so he said that he proposed to the state party on August 14th, the day after the convention, that they, reconvene the convention to amend the minutes and change the declared winner from Jim Conklin to Geraldine Jones. He says that, the precinct members, the voting members have to do that. He can't do that himself arbitrarily. And because that was not done, and because a winner was declared at convention, he is not going to sign off on paperwork that is not reflective of what happened at the convention, and says, he believes he did things by the book, and that he consulted an attorney and 3 parliamentarians who agreed with him. Fast forward, the Republican Party of Iowa submits nomination paperwork for Geraldine Jones to the Iowa Secretary of State's office for Jones to be listed on the ballot, but the paperwork did not include Justin Wasson's signature. It didn't include the signature of the chair of the convention attesting to the results that they're submitting essentially to the Secretary of State's office. And so the Secretary of State's office rejected that nominating paperwork because it didn't have the signature of the chair of the convention. Because of that, there will not be a Republican on the ballot. And the deadline to file an affidavit of candidacy and a political party convention certificate to appear on the ballot was sometime last week. It was like the 21st or the 24th. Anyway, that deadline has passed, right? And then the deadline for candidates to file nominating petitions and other paperwork to run as an independent, unaffiliated with a political party has also passed. So neither Jones nor Conklin it can be listed on the ballot, either as a Republican or as an independent, because the deadline's passed. Neither of them filed paperwork to run as an independent. So their only chance going forward to run for the seat is to run as a write-in candidate.
And the amazing cherry on top of this, Tom, what makes this, it's already an incredible story. What makes it a whole nother level incredible is this is a competitive district. This isn't like, nobody ran in the primary because it's a district that the Democrats are going to win by 30 percentage points anyways. This was close 2 years ago.
Right. Although you could make the argument that getting a campaign up off the ground this late in the game
sure
is going to be somewhat of a heavy lift, especially when you're now running against the incumbent. Remember, 2 years
Right.
ago, this was an open seat.
Yeah.
So it's
fresh out of redistricting too, right? That would have been the first election out of redistricting.
right.
Yep.
Right. Fresh out of redistricting. So I mean, the dynamics are different this go around this cycle. You're running against an incumbent, who incumbents, as we all know, have kind of a natural advantage. And now you've got, man, Jared is probably going to know this on the top of your head. How many days until the election? What are we at? Like little.
I didn't check today, so I don't actually know.
I mean,
I think we're sub 70 now, though.
Yeah, I was gonna say we're below 70 days now to the general election for you to now run a campaign,
Yeah.
right?
That's a good point.
Get your name out there. So I was talking to somebody who is plugged into Lynn County GOP politics, who argued, this actually might be a win for all sides. So it could be a win for Geraldine Jones because now she can use this to, claim that she is a victim and, build support for, her run for office in the future, or potentially to run for a higher position or more prominent position within the Moms for Liberty organization, potentially, a national position with Moms for Liberty. And again, can paint herself as a victim and use that right to rally people to her side and build, support and momentum for her campaign or whatever. The Republican Party of Iowa now does not have to spend money on a race, supporting a candidate who, potentially may have, somewhat of an uphill battle, right? To run in a district that, while it may be competitive, is not one that they are, I guess, guaranteed to win.
Because it was so close last time, I am wondering what the vote share is going to be for the Democratic candidate, since there's not going to be anyone else on the ballot, but that it was decently close.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to watch.
Yeah.
Well, and one thing last time, the last election in that district was a little unusual because the Republican opponent was a longtime at-large city council member from Cedar Rapids who was familiar to people and people knew. I mean, I think Geraldine Jones would probably be familiar to people for turning in false signatures in her school board bid. But
yeah, that's the other thing is, she ran for Cedar Rapids school board and was unsuccessful there. And I guess there's a question mark as to how voters would respond to her and respond to kind of a Moms for Liberty aligned candidate. I mean, granted, this is not a school board position. It's a completely different race. It's a more, partisan politicized position. So
Yeah.
who knows? But anyway.
Just so it's on the record, we are 67 days, 9
All right.
hours, and 28 minutes as of the time of this recording to Election Day.
Fantastic. There we go. We have it. All right. Finally, this week, we have another story with election intrigue, albeit one that has nothing to do with ballot access. In Western Iowa's super conservative 4th Congressional District, Kevin Virgil, the candidate who ran unsuccessfully against incumbent Republican Congressman Randy Feenstra in the June primary, Virgil has endorsed the Democratic candidate, Ryan Melton, in the general election. That has set off a firestorm of reaction from the very top of the Iowa Republican Party, especially if you're on the Twitters or the X's, whatever we're calling it these days. Jared, I understand you've been doing some little homework on that front. Tell us more.
Oh, yeah, to put it bluntly, Kevin Virgil really pissed off a lot of people. So backtracking to Sunday, Virgil, who took almost 40% of the vote, after challenging Feenstra. He posted an article on Twitter to say why he was supporting a split ticket of Donald Trump for president and Ryan Melton for the 4th district. And part of the reasoning that he gave was he said that blind party loyalty, voting red no matter what, has yielded serious problems for the state. And his list of problems included a dip in Iowa's public education ranking, an uptick in Iowa's cancer diagnoses, a child poverty rate of 12% and more. And he said that given those problems, he thought that Melton would represent the district better than Feenstra has for 2 terms. And that Melton is pragmatic and has a good character. And also, stating the somewhat obvious, Virgil said, "This is not a typical endorsement, as today's politicians are expected to place party loyalty above all." Very understated there. Melton welcomed the news and said, "I appreciate Kevin's bravery here in highlighting the backslide we are seeing in so many vital quality of life indicators in the state under Republican control." Now, as you noted, Republican Party people in Iowa were less than welcoming of the news. So let's just go to the highlight reel now. Feenstra's campaign spokesman, Billy First, said in part, "It's no surprise that New York liberal Kevin Virgil has endorsed anti-Trump liberal Ryan Melton. Virgil is an East Coast liberal and chose to endorse a Democrat that would block the Trump agenda at every opportunity." Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds said, "Sore loser Kevin Virgil just endorsed Randy Feenstra's radical Democrat opponent who praises Bernie Sanders and believes biological men should play in girls' sports," which is not something that Melton has specifically said. And Virgil, during his primary, was pretty critical of a variety of trans issues, including posts from the White House spokeswoman about transgender day of visibility. Brenna Bird said, "We all need to unify after the primary and back Randy Feenstra. A secure border, strong economy, backing the blue, and support for conservative values are on the ballot this fall." So she didn't mention Virgil by name and didn't make so much of an attack as a call for solidarity, which I thought was interesting. State Party Chair Jeff Kaufman said, "I've said it all year and I'll say it again. Refusing to support the candidate who wins the primary is a misguided position and completely disrespects the grassroots who voted in the primary. This position favors a socialist, anti-Trump candidate and helps Kamala Harris." Marionette Miller Meeks said, "New York liberal," there's that phrase again, "Kevin Virgil's endorsement of a radical Dem for Congress is rich." And then she touted Feenstra's record. And then the rest of Iowa's congressional delegation, sans Chuck Grassley, at least from what I could see on Twitter, reiterated their support for Feenstra or slammed Kevin Virgil or both. Even Vivek Ramaswamy, who supported Virgil in the primary, said that he's endorsing Feenstra in the general election and didn't buy into Virgil's idea. And in response to the deluge of pushback, Virgil said, "Very interesting that all of the ongoing denouncing of my decision to not support a bad leader is full of hysterics and ad hominem attacks, but not a single objective rebuttal to my claims." And then to Reynolds in particular, he said, "Instead of dismissing me as a sore loser, Kim Reynolds should ask the voters, why is Randy Feenstra so widely disliked that his primary challenger took the drastic step of crossing party lines to endorse his opponent?"
Yeah. I'm glad, Jared, that you read aloud a couple of those tweets that said
there's so many more, like
right.
so many of the counties in the 4th district, like the county Republican groups, all
Okay.
have their own statements. Candidates in the 4th district in different house races. Yeah, I could have gone on for another 30 minutes.
I believe you, and I'm glad that in particular you read the ones that called him New York liberal Kevin Virgil, because I read those when they came out over the weekend, and it's one of those things that after you read it, you question whether you saw what you just saw. So hearing you read them and confirm them makes me feel better that I wasn't just having a fever dream there or hallucinating the phrase.
And that was a line of
Kevin Virgil.
That was a line of attack that came up during the primary. Feenstra and his campaign.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they called him that repeatedly in the primary because he lived in New York for a while. And I should note too that Virgil's already said he intends to run again in 2026.
Yeah, here we go.
So obviously a lot of people are mad at him now, but with how short everyone's memory is, I don't know if this will be much of an issue when he runs again or not.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll eat my words on that, but
Um, did the Feenstra campaign explain why they called the liberal part of Kevin Virgil? Like, obviously he lived in New York. That's easy enough.
well, I mean that's part of it, and then like their attacks on him, they also said that like he supported traitor Edward Snowden when it comes to like you know, being a whistleblower, and they also in the primary accused him of not being sufficiently loyal to Israel, supportive of Israel.
Okay.
So that was another like thing that kind of factored into that
Those
attack.
okay. Those are the things that made him liberal. Okay.
I
Interesting.
I suspect I know the answer to this, but can any of the three of you think of a time when somebody endorsed a candidate in the other party in the general election after running in the primary for the other party?
I certainly can't.
That's very specific, I know, but
Yeah. I mean, that's crossover endorsements, period, are exceptionally rare. I don't even know if I could come up with one of those, but you add in that from someone who literally ran in the party primary. I can't imagine that's ever happened.
Yeah, the only thing, go ahead, Tom, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say the only example I can think of is Jim Leach.
Yeah.
And yeah, did he endorse Christina Bohannon in the last cycle, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And again, that's different than this, what Jared's asking, but it at least is a crossover.
It's a crossover, yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, the only one I can remember is Lee Clancy, who's a Republican, was the mayor of Cedar Rapids, and she endorsed Al Gore in 2000. And after Bush won, the Bush supporters in the Senate made sure she wasn't able to join the Iowa Department of Transportation Board. They
Oops.
shot they shot down her nomination and all high-fived and whooped that they brought her down. So yeah, you know, the pettiness is is has long been an attribute of this sort of stuff.
Sorry, I just found another example. So retiring Republican state lawmaker Jared Klein from Kyoto
Oh yeah.
endorsed former Democratic Iowa State Senator Kevin Kinney.
Yep. That was
Um,
very recent here. Yeah.
yeah.
Again, slight, still not quite what Jared's describing, but we are
but
getting
it's in the
closer. At least, like
ballpark.
it's
Yeah.
in his district. Like he was,
It was
that was Jared's. Jared was in the
Mhm.
House, and that was the overlap in that Senate district. So it's closer at least.
But yeah, it still is pretty wild.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, amazing. Like you said, to literally go through the party primary and then uh endorse.
I,
We
I
sorry, go ahead, Jared.
I should note, at least publicly, Steve King has not had any tweets about this. I have not had time to reach out to him for a comment. I probably should at some point, but at least publicly on Twitter, not any comments, and he's fairly active on Twitter.
I was going to say, which is kind of amazing, right? That may be one of the more surprising things about this whole story is that Steve King hasn't
Well,
weighed in yet.
you have to wonder why they're so pissed and jittery about it. I mean, if they hadn't made a big deal out of it by denouncing him, I doubt most people would have ever heard what happened. But
Todd, I was wondering about that too. I was wondering if there's a little bit of a Streisand effect kind of thing
Yeah.
with this, because like now even the New York Post has run like a story about this.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I had the same reaction too. In fact, I believe Connor and I here in the bureau office were discussing that within the last few days. Like I wasn't 100% sure why the state party troops felt that they needed to rally around Randy Feenstra like that. I mean, I know, look, the guy got 40% in the primary. That's not a small number. But I can't imagine there's a ton of those who are going to go out and vote for Ryan Melton this fall, regardless of what Kevin Virgil says. But I don't know. I don't know. I'm also not a member of a political party, so I don't know how those things always function.
I guess if you let someone go like that and live, then
Yeah.
everyone's going to do it. It's kind of
Yeah.
a mafia type thing, So
Gotta try and collect your scalps when you can.
yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. By the way, so quick, total tangent here, but when you said the word mafia, I just finished a really good podcast that I'm going to recommend because it was journalist produced too, so that it at least has a theme here. My Cousin Augie from the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, so good. And it has to do with the Milwaukee Mafia. That's why it occurred to me when you said that. Anyways, I won't say more. Just go find that. My Cousin Augie, great podcast.
What was the Milwaukee Mafia's traded? Beer and cheese?
It was all about vending machine business was at the heart of this thing. It was
Remember in Kenosha the big curd wars took many lives back in those days.
We barely survived those. Oh man. All right, that's it for this episode of On Iowa Politics. So we appreciate you all joining us. If you're not already, please subscribe to us on your streaming service of choice or on YouTube, where you should also smash that like button. And you can also find the podcast each week on your preferred Gazette or Lee newspaper website. You have so many options to find us, you really have no excuse for not. Tell all your friends. Now that you listen to the On Iowa Politics podcast, make sure you're also subscribed to the On Iowa Politics newsletter, where every morning in your inbox, you'll receive the latest politics and government coverage from our team. You can subscribe to that free newsletter at the Gazette's website, thegazette.com. And lastly, don't forget that the work of everyone who heard here today can be found on the pages of websites of the Quad City Times, Muscatine Journal, Cedar Rapids Gazette, Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier, Mason City Globe Gazette, Council Bluffs Daily Nonpareil, and the Sioux City Journal. For Todd Barton, Jared McNett, Todd Dorman, and our producer, Bailey.cichon, I'm Erin Murphy. Be well, everyone, and be good.